Welcome to the Code with Jason meetup. Today we're going to be doing SaturnCI some more. Um, Here's what we got going on right now. Um, in the last session, or at least one of the most recent sessions, we worked on the following. I'm going to get a new build going so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so when a build is running, it'll say running for the status and it'll have a timer. Previously, when the build would finish, it would just continue to say running and the timer would keep going. That's obviously not what we want. So I implemented something that will change the status from running to passed without having to refresh the page. And that's fine and good, but there's a bug. You can see that when I click on these various builds on the left here, the build goes from white to light gray. Um, when a build finishes, there's a turbo stream update that refreshes the partial that renders each build link here. And that partial has a local variable that says what the active build is, the build that we're currently looking at. And when a build finishes, there's like no way to know which one is the active one. And so just to put something there, I said just set this build to the active build. But then what happens is if some other build is active and this one finishes, then this one will continue to be gray, but this other one will become gray also, which is obviously illogical because only one can be active at a time. So we got to fix that somehow. So let's look at how it works right now. Okay, so here's what happens when a job finishes. Each one of these builds runs on a virtual machine on DigitalOcean. That virtual machine is running a shell script. And at the end of a build, that shell script makes a request back to SaturnCI, in this case, just back to my local machine. And it says, hey, the job is finished. It makes a request to this endpoint. And so we say, okay, if this job is finished and also all the other jobs in this build are finished, because a build can have multiple jobs. If this job is finished and so are all the other ones, then let's broadcast an update that says that this build is finished. But then as you can see here, it says that the current build is this build, but that's not necessarily true. So let's take a look at this list item partial, this builds list item partial. Okay. So here's where the current build comes into the picture. You can see that if the build in this partial matches the current build, then we set the CSS class for this link to active. So my thought here is instead of passing the current build here, why don't we just change the way this partial is composed? And instead of including the link in the partial, let's have the partial just start from here and have the link outside. That way the partial doesn't have to know what the current build is. So let's see if that's viable. Let's look at where this list item partial is included from. Okay, it is here. So if my idea is viable, then I think we should be able to just like grab this link and put it here. And obviously I'll grab the end and put it here. Okay. And I'll just fix the indentation here. And then in my controller here, I just won't have to pass anything for the current build. Okay. So you can actually see the bug demonstrated here. We had this one selected, then this build finished, and now we have two that are gray.
I don't think you've
Okay.
quite done that right.
Sorry.
I don't think you've quite done that right because you didn't change current build to whatever was being passed in. And the difference is the div is now inside the thing when before the partial was inside the div, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, good point. Um, okay, I'll address those one at a time. I think we might actually want the div inside, but the current build part is obviously wrong because it's not even running without errors.
I think it's that at build. That's what you're passing in anyway.
Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay. And then of course that goes away. Okay. Let's see. And sometimes this page takes a really long time to load, which is on my mental to-do list to address. Okay. So we changed that, but obviously this would be a really long and crappy feedback loop if I had to start a new build and then wait like 3 minutes or 4 minutes even to see if what I just did worked or not. But luckily, I have an automated test, so we can use that. But it would be epistemologically invalid for me to check my automated test now and see that the bug is absent and conclude that what I just did fixed it, because I wouldn't know if my observation of the bug being absent is because I fixed it or because just in that particular test for some reason it doesn't exhibit the buggy behavior. So what we have to do is stash this to get it back to the buggy state, and then we have to run the test and see if the buggy behavior is present. Okay. So I don't remember what the test is. Maybe it's this elapsed build time one. Let me check. Okay, I believe it is. So this is a test for when the build goes from running to finished. And we can run this and see. Okay. Okay. So this tells us nothing because there's only one build. So it's always just going to coincidentally work properly. So let's create a test where there are multiple builds. And actually, I'm not a huge fan of the way things are organized right now, because right now this is called elapsed build time spec. And it's like this bug we're talking about doesn't particularly have anything to do with the elapsed build time. Furthermore, there's some other tests somewhere else that have something to do with build status. And so I feel like it would make sense to kind of unify things and put these status related specs in a group. So let's do this. So right now we have this folder called spec builds, and we have spec build system build status spec. I think I'm going to change this. I'm going to create a spec builds build status directory. I'm going to put a system directory inside there. And then I'm going to move this build status spec to here.
Do you not
Now
usually
that's,
use git move?
sorry.
Do you not usually use git move to keep the git history?
Oh, that's a good idea. I should have done that. But no, I know about it, but I never do it because I don't know why. I just haven't turned that into a habit, I guess.
Fair enough.
Okay. But this name is maybe not great. Spec builds, build status, system builds status spec. It's very broad. And so let's look at this test and see if there's actually something more specific happening there. Okay, this is when the build goes from running to past. Okay. And it's not super clear how this is different from the like elapsed time specs. Let's take a look. Okay, build status spec, elapsed time spec. Okay, so we have when the build goes from running to finished here, and this is running to past. Very similar ideas. Okay. So I think there's some redundancy here. This test says when the build goes from running to past and we refresh the page, then we see past on the page. Um, and this is for when the build goes from running to finished and we don't refresh the page. I suppose it does make sense to have both, but I think we could frame this in a clearer way. So I'm actually going to take some stuff from here. Okay, so I'm going to make these two tests very similar. Okay, now they're almost identical in the setup. I'm going to take this and move it to here. Okay, and now this test is empty and I'm going to delete it. Okay, so I'm actually going to commit just that. Okay, so all I did here was I unified these two tests. Unify tests. Okay. And why did I do a commit just then? The reason is because I have high confidence in that change that I just made. Like I'm very sure that I I wanted to do that and it wasn't a mistake to do that. But whatever I'm going to do next, I'm not so sure that I'm going to be so sure about the next thing. And so I wanted to get this thing like locked down, this most recent change locked down, so that if my next change, which might be more experimental, If it goes sideways and I have to blow it away, then I can just blow away that experimental change and I don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater and undo this change also. Okay, so let's review what we have here. We have when the build goes from running to passed, we have running build. These two tests are very related to elapsed time. So I think I'm going to do this. Describe elapsed time. And this test is not so related to elapsed time. Or actually, it kind of is. Okay, I think it is actually. I'm going to be more specific here. Instead of it goes from counting to not counting, it changes the elapsed time from counting to not counting. And that shows us more clearly that this test is related to elapsed time. Okay. So call me crazy, but I'm going to commit that. Again, because I'm very sure about that change, but I don't know if whatever I do next is going to be so solid. Um, Improve test organization. Okay. Now let's address something else here. Right now, so this test was written before we had the functionality of automatically updating these statuses. And by the way, this is interesting. This build actually failed, even though it's just a rerun. All right, I don't want to get distracted by this, but I can't help but be curious what the failure was. So apparently we have a flaky test. All right, we'll make a mental note of that. But I don't want to distract ourselves with that right now. Okay, this test was written before we had this feature of updating these statuses without refreshing the page. But now that we have that, I feel like it makes sense to do something like this. Okay. And then instead of updating the test in this way, we can update the test in the same way that we're doing it down here. I'll explain this in a second. Okay. So this, as you can see, it hits the job finished events API endpoint. So here we're just reaching into the database directly. But here we're hitting the endpoint. And actually, maybe we should hit the endpoint here. It's just the difference is we refresh the page after or not. Okay. So I don't actually expect this test to pass because we're never explicitly saying that the test suite has passed. But apparently it has. That's interesting. I'm curious why. Hmm. Okay. Let's see. Build.all. Okay, we just have the one dot first dot status passed. Okay. What determines the status of a build? It's the status of all of its jobs. Let's see how many jobs it has. It has just one job. That job has a status of passed. Okay, it has a status of passed if the job is finished and not failed. What determines if it's failed? If the test report includes the word failed. Okay, so I guess when a test suite finishes, it's passed as long as it's not failed. It's debatable whether that's the right logic, but that at least is the logic. And so that explains why this test is passing. And I'm satisfied enough with that for now. Okay, so if I run all these tests, do they pass? They do. Okay. And then is this the clearest way we can express this? I can see that it says build goes from running to past, but then the it says it shows the most current status. Why does it say that instead of saying it shows past or something like that? Um, and actually, how about this? It changes the status from running to past. I think that's a much better description. I'm actually going to flip the order of these because I think the scenario where you don't refresh the page is actually more relevant than the scenario where you do refresh the page. Because I think kind of the normal use case,
Yeah, more scenarios, people will not be refreshing the page, right?
yeah, I think so. Usually you'll see your build here and you'll just
Yep.
see it go from running to past. Okay. Um, what did I just do? Okay, I improved some descriptions and stuff. It's kind of miscellaneous improvements. I'll just say improve tests. Okay. And by the way, um, I think it's very beneficial to spend a lot of dedicated effort on not just writing tests, but keeping the tests organized and understandable. Like just now we moved some tests from one location in the file system to another. We gave these tests different labels and descriptions and stuff like that. Just like code has to be refactored to stay understandable, tests have to be refactored to stay understandable too. And if the tests if the tests are just a mess, then that's not nearly as helpful as if they're neatly organized. And it's going to make the test suite more annoying to work with if they're not organized, and people will write fewer tests and they'll do a sloppier job because of broken windows and stuff like that. So it really pays off to keep the test suite organized. But I mention all this because I hardly ever see anybody paying attention to how understandable the individual tests and the test suite as a whole are. Okay. So I think there's a problem with this test. This is like not realistic. This is not how a test actually goes from running to passed. It only ever goes from running to passed via an HTTP request. So we can we can use a request here. I'm actually going to put the same expectation here, but only to prevent a race condition. And then afterward, we can refresh the page and just confirm that the status is still passed. And so this is actually a little bit of a different scenario. We can say full page refresh after test finishes. After build finishes. And we don't want to say that it changes the status. We want to say that it maintains the past status. Okay, let's see if that test passes. Okay, great. Does everything in the file still pass? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll commit that. Okay. And by the way, you might notice that I'm doing a git push on every single commit. I think a lot of people are hesitant to do that because they don't want to invoke they don't want to raise their CI bill too much. But the whole point of having tests is to have a feedback loop. And we have feedback loops at multiple levels. Like we run individual tests locally, then we push the CI and let the whole test suite run. And ideally, we're deploying multiple times a day to get fast feedback in that way. And all these feedback loops have overhead. All the feedback loops come with a cost. Like, whoops, didn't mean to do that. It costs more to run tests locally than it does not to. And it costs more to deploy frequently than to deploy once in a while because each deployment has a cost, each test run has a cost. But a lot of these costs are kind of hidden. Like if I run these tests and wait for them to pass, takes a couple seconds, we didn't really feel that cost. We don't get a bill for it, but it did cost something. And again, when we deploy 10 times a day instead of once a week, we don't get a bill for that, but it still had a cost because our time has a cost. It's just that on CI, we happen to get a bill for it. And so we feel that cost a bit more. But the reason that people do these short feedback loops, running tests locally and deploying frequently and stuff like that, is because we're making a bet that on average, the cost of running those feedback loops is less than the cost of the feedback loops themselves. And so I personally am making a bet that my policy of running the test suite on every single commit on average is cheaper than waiting. Because if I only run CI like when I think I'm done, then what happens if it fails? Then I have to dig through everything I've done and try to find what caused the tests to start failing. And that might have happened a lot of commits ago. And so it might be hard to find. And then it might also be really hard to fix. That failing test might have told me something was fundamentally wrong with my design. And now, since I'm not finding out about that until the end, I have to go and redesign everything. And that's going to be enormously expensive. That kind of thing is not going to happen every time. Most times it'll probably be a trivial problem. But what matters is the average cost. And so again, I'm betting that on average, it's going to be cheaper to run the tests to run the whole test suite on every commit. Okay. So we kind of cleaned up these couple tests. We have these elapsed time tests, and I think I'm happy enough with those for now. Now what do we want? We want to test for the scenario where there are multiple builds. So it's going to be similar to this. So I'll copy this. I'll go down here and say context multiple builds. And we'll say it maintains the current active build. I'm actually going to say this. I'm going to do this in a fairly different way. I'm going to say describe build list links. Okay, so I'm describing the build list links, so these here. And I'm saying that when a build goes from running to finished, it maintains the currently active build. So, oh, and I have to say something about multiple builds, or maybe not, I don't know, but I'm going to create another build. Let's see. Okay, so we visit the build path for our one build that we have. Okay. Yeah, let's do this. Okay, so we'll want a different build. And I happen to know that it's going to need to be in the same project in order to show up on the same page. So we'll go like that. Okay. So we'll visit our one build, and then we will let the other build finish. Now, I don't think we even need that expect there. Um, actually, maybe we do. And I'm going to put count 2 because we should see running twice because there's 2 builds. And then we're going to make the other build finish. So other build. And actually here we need a job. Let's do this. Okay, so we'll make the other job finish. Okay. And then we will, I'm just going to put it as a comment for the moment. Expect other job link not to be active. I think I actually have a page object for this. Yeah, so I have this page object called build link, and it takes a build as an argument, and it has this active method. So I think I can do this. I can say like other job build link equals page objects build link dot new other build. Okay, and it takes the page as an argument too. Page other build. Expect other job build link not to be active. Okay. Now, if I did all this correctly, which is a big if, I would expect this test to fail. but yeah, not surprisingly, I did something wrong. Line 51. Hmm. Um, I don't see where my issue is. Okay. So I think I'm gonna try this. I'll see if it passes with that stuff gone or if it doesn't give an error. Okay, it still gives an error. That tells me my issue is not inside there.
It's saying overbuild.
Sorry.
It's saying the problems with overbuild.
Hmm. Wonder what the problem is. Do you see specifically what the issue is?
Nope.
All right. Um, wrong number of arguments given 0 expected 1 plus. Okay. Well, let's take away all this and let's take away this other job, see what happens. Okay, and then let's see what happens when we do this. Okay, so it's with this project build.project thing. Hmm. Well, that is, excuse me, that is surprising. Let's see if I have anything similar somewhere. Create build project. I didn't even find that one, so I must be doing something wrong. Hmm. Okay, looks like I'm doing that in one other place. Select project spec. Yeah, here on line 18. Okay. So let's do this. Whoops. I'm just going to make a new test here. Okay. Okay, I think I need to call it something other than build because there already is a build.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Let's do this. Oh, when I just type build and that's all, it gives me that error. That's interesting. And I don't know why that happens. Okay. Oh, because build is like a keyword. Interesting. Um, yeah. Well, let's ask ChatGPT what to do about this. It's interesting that it's conflicting in this case, but not in any other cases.
Is that the first time you've used the build record anywhere?
Yeah, I've used it a lot of other times. This zoom window's always in the way. Okay, conflicting with factory bots build method. What can I do? Well, yeah, obviously I can rename build to something else, but I don't want to have to do that. Also, I don't need all the code back, ChatGPT. Um, yes, I know I can fully qualify it, but it's getting it backwards, I think. It's not that the factory bot build is conflicting with my build, is that my build is conflicting with the factory bot build. Okay, well, I do have this. Oh no, Rails helper is what I want. Um, Factory. Oh, I thought I had the factory bot helpers in here somewhere. Yeah, spec. Oh, it was spec helper after all. Yeah, we're doing this config.include factory bot syntax method. So let's see if I take that away, does it make that error go away? If the error is still present, then maybe I'm wrong about the issue. Okay, no, the error is not still present. Okay, so, hmm, this is funny. The problem is because I don't even have anything called build. I just have job. It's job.build. Okay, so shame on me. All right, I'm going to change this to job.build.project. Now let's see how it works. Okay. Okay. Um, this failed, and let's make sure that it failed in the exact way that we're expecting. Yep. Okay. So I'm glad I didn't just go ahead and fix the bug because wanting to see the bug exhibited in the tests prompted me to do all this refactoring of the tests and to write this new test, which I think will make a lot of projects so much more robust. Um, okay, so we have the test. Now we can do a git stash pop, and that brings back our supposed fix. And now we can run the test again and see if it actually fixes it. Okay, and the test passes, but I kind of want to see it with my own eyes. So let's put a binding.pry in here. Okay. Yep. So that's behaving as it should. I'll review my changes as always. Okay, no surprises there. And then say fix active build link bug. Okay. By the way, I have a hobby. I'm a collector of UUIDs, and I like to always notice UUIDs that seem interesting or improbable. I find this one kind of interesting. 9966 666. There's some an improbable level of repetition there, I feel like. Anyway, so this build link is active. So I would expect that when this build finishes, it goes from running to past, but this build link won't become active. Okay. And by the way, it's my dream sometime to have a physical UUID museum where there's, plaques on the wall with UUIDs and the story behind them and stuff like that.
Oh, was that the number of the beast that attracted you to the URL? I could see
Yeah,
six
this
six
is
six.
this is my most satanic build yet. Okay. So now we have to decide what we're going to do next. Something that's been on my to-do list for a long time. So we're totally changing gears here because this is this is supposedly done. Something that's been on my to-do list for a long time is to make it so that when the test output is outputting, it keeps you stuck to the bottom so that it kind of simulates terminal output. So let's get working on this. I'm going to leave this one open. I'm going to open up a new tab. Okay. So, as usual, we're going to want to start with a test. So how do we write a test that asserts that we're stuck to the bottom? I think we'll need to have, first of all, we'll need to have enough content here that that you have to scroll. And we can assert that when we land on this page, this bottommost text is visible. So let's figure out how to do that. First step is to decide where we're going to put this test. And I'm not sure. It has to do with this output. But it's not just the test output, it's the system logs also. Um, More generally, you might call this like terminal output or something like that. By the way, I see that this test went to past and it didn't get selected. So the bug is in fact gone.
Nice.
Okay. Um, okay, so where do we put this test? I'm not sure. Let's look around a little bit and see what's already there. What if I do this tree spec? Yeah, let's look at that. Okay, so we have our API specs here. That's not relevant. Build navigation, build lists, factories, helpers, jobs, models, CLI, streaming. Yeah, maybe we want to put it in there. Seems relevant to streaming. Okay. Can I do this? Yeah, okay. So right now inside the streaming directory, we have system logs and we have these system directories. By the way, notice that my directory structure is inverted. I I don't do the test type first and then the domain concept. I do the domain concept first and then the test type. And I wrote a whole article about that. Um, you can find that I don't know, code with JSON, um, organize test suite. Yeah. So if you want to check out the idea behind that, you can search for code with JSON, organized test suite. Anyway, I have spec streaming system logs, which corresponds to this, but I don't have spec streaming test output. So maybe we can do that, or we can just write more tests for system logs because it behaves the same way. I think I'm actually going to do that. Okay, so we have tests for staying on the system log tab. And this is all streaming. Maybe this isn't so related to streaming, but it actually is. Yeah, okay. So let's do this. Spec streaming system logs system um scrolling spec.rb we'll call it. Okay. I'm going to start with the shell of one of these other tests. Whoops. Scrolling. Whoops, I'm not even in the right thing here. Oh, they all start with S. Scrolling spec. Okay. And I always run the test even when it's empty, just to make sure it's gonna work. Okay, and I'm gonna open one of these other tests. System log, system. Okay. So first we can log in and visit the system logs tab. Okay. So we need a job, I guess. I'm just gonna call it job, not original job. Okay. We'll see if that runs. I don't think it's actually doing anything, so I don't know if that actually told me anything. But we want to give this system log some content. Um, let's see. Here's one way to do it. System logs, okay. We can do this line \n times 500. Okay, and then I'm going to put and what's the scenario here? We're going to say I don't know, it scrolls to the bottom. Maybe I'll want to change that eventually, but it's good enough for a start. I'm just going to put a binding.pry right here. Okay, and I want to be able to see the browser. Okay, so we have all of our 500 lines right there. And then what we can do is we can do this. We can say, so now we have one at the bottom that says bottom. Okay. So now we can assert that bottom is visible. I don't know if this is going to work. Okay, that passed, which is not what we want. Because when the page loads, we can't see bottom because it's not scrolled to the bottom. So we need to do it a different way. And actually, we have a test somewhere that does something very similar. But I have to find it. Trouble is, I have no idea how to look for it. Let's see. Let's try to figure out where it might be. So it's
There a
not any of these API
keyword?
tests. Sorry?
Isn't there a visible keyword?
Yeah, good point. And let's see if I used it. Build navigation stickiness. That sounds promising. Oh, but it's not the right kind of visible. But I think this actually is the test I was looking for. Um, and
Is that doing the same thing?
let's see. When the log pane is scrolled all the way to the bottom, it keeps the build navigation visible. So this test is asserting that when we scroll all the way to the bottom, this stuff is still visible.
So
Yeah, because at one point I actually introduced a regression where if you scroll down, the menu went with it. So I just wanted to prevent that from happening again.
it's got the
Okay.
same setup with the ASDF n times 1,000 bottom of test.
Oh yeah, that's very similar. Okay. Um, so let's see exactly what this is doing. And by the way, what do we want to do? Okay. And I have to go precisely at the end of the hour because we're babysitting some small children at my house right now, and my wife will be unhappy with me if I don't come help her with those kids soon. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so the expectation is that we can't see it where we are. So what the heck is this doing? This is scrolling. I see. Okay,
I
so this
think you
isn't
can
the same
add,
thing.
yeah, I think you can just add has contents bottom visible true. And I think that will do what you want. This
Yeah,
should, I think.
I should have just listened to you in the first place. Okay, so
Yeah.
what happens here? Oh,
No, it's
interesting.
not. It's not a keyword.
Um, but that rings a bell. ChatGPT will surely help us out with this one. Huh. All right, so this is not as elegant as I was hoping for. Interesting. So it does have that. Let's capybara visible true.
No, it's actually has text where you can pass has text visible and then the text.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, like that.
Uh, this one's a question, so it's like has text question mark.
Yeah, I think predicate methods like that get translated to this. Okay.
Chat on Zoom. There you
Hmm. Yeah, this and this are the same thing. Because like has content gets translated to have content with no question mark.
Yeah,
Just
so I think
any.
it's have
uh,
text. I think it's have text visible and then bottom, just based on what it says below. Not sure. It's either type is first and then the text.
Huh. Type. Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. Visible and then text. This is not ringing any kind of bell for me. Oh, and that also still passes.
Interesting.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so visible true doesn't work. Let's, okay, let's look just a little bit more. Oh no, and it's 10:02. Okay, I'm over my time limit.
Maybe it's just to do with if the element's hidden, but because it's just off the screen and not hidden, maybe it's still finding it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that seems like you're probably right. Okay, I'm just gonna, okay, so now when I pick back up, I'll be able to see that I have this incomplete test, and that should remind me what I'm working on. So I think that's a good stopping point there. To
Cool.
quickly review what we've done today, we cleaned up the test suite a little bit, and we fixed this bug where multiple build links were being selected. And then obviously we started writing the test for keeping you scrolled to the bottom. And we'll pick that up next time. Well, thanks guys for joining me, and I'll see you next time.